"You're under arrest," the man barked, flashing a flimsy badge in Comic Sans font. My 15-year-old son looked up from his phone mid-dog walk, thinking it was a prank. By the time he realized it wasn't, he was in the back of a dented gray SUV with no license plates, kidnapped by fake cops working for the HOA. And I, the real police commissioner, was about to turn their little neighborhood patrol into a national scandal. It started like any normal Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee on the back porch, watching my son Ethan stroll down the community trail with our golden retriever, Max. The same trail he'd used every day since we moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago. It was a quiet area. Upscale, boring, predictable. Or so I thought. The HOA had always been a bit overbearing, nitpicking about lawn heights and mailbox colors, but I never imagined they'd go full-blown rogue law enforcement. My wife called out from the kitchen about breakfast, and I went in to help flip pancakes. About 10 minutes later, I heard the dog barking frantically. I looked out the window and saw Max sprinting back toward the house, alone. No leash. No Ethan. I knew something was wrong. Grabbing my phone, I stepped outside just as Max ran in circles on the porch, whining and pawing at the front door. I checked our security app and rewound the camera footage. My heart dropped. 2 men in mismatched uniforms had approached Ethan on the trail. They spoke briefly, then one of them grabbed him by the arm and shoved him toward a vehicle waiting near the curb. The SUV had no markings, just a magnetic sticker that said, "Neighborhood Patrol," in fading blue ink. I zoomed in. The uniforms looked off. No patches. The radios were kids' walkie-talkies from a toy store. One of them even had untied shoelaces. I tapped into our garage camera feed. It had caught the rear of the vehicle. No plates. I called Ethan's phone. Straight to voicemail. My cop instincts kicked in instantly. I called dispatch. Any units deployed to my home address or the surrounding area? I asked. The reply came swift and firm. Negative. No activity logged. That's when it hit me. Someone had impersonated police officers and abducted my son in broad daylight. I, the highest-ranking officer in the city, had just been hit with a crime that wouldn't have made sense in a third-rate soap opera. I pulled up the app for our private neighborhood group and scrolled through the latest posts. One caught my eye. HOA cracks down on trail violations. Expect enforcement. It was posted by Karen Holloway, the acting HOA vice president, community gossip ringmaster, and self-declared queen of neighborhood law. I jumped into my car and drove straight to her house. I didn't even knock. She was outside trimming her roses, wearing a sun visor and sipping iced tea like nothing had happened. "Karen, where is my son?" I demanded. She raised an eyebrow like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Oh, your boy violated Trail Code 87C. Dogs without HOA-issued leash tags are prohibited. Our new enforcement officers took him in for questioning." "Questioning?" I repeated, stepping closer. "Under what jurisdiction?" She smiled. "Community jurisdiction. You really should attend our charter meetings more often." I clenched my jaw and kept my hands at my side. "You just authorized the detainment of a minor using fake cops and a fake vehicle. That's a felony." "Oh, please." She waved me off. "They're trained. Officer Ted used to be security at a mall." I stared at her. "Do you understand who I am?" She laughed and turned her back. "Some HOA members think they're untouchable. Let's see if your badge matters here." I walked back to my car, calling one of my top internal affairs officers on the way. "Keep this off the books for now."
Hello friends, if you're new here then don't forget to hit subscribe button, and if you like then hit the like button also, and don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're from watching this video.
I said, "But I want a silent perimeter, undercover. Find my son. Do not engage the HOA yet. I want this done right." By the time I got home, the team was already working. We traced the neighborhood cameras. One smart officer even checked GPS data from Ethan's smartwatch, which was still active. The signal led us not to a police station, but to a house listed on Airbnb 2 blocks away, currently under maintenance. According to the listing, the closer we looked, the more insane it became. That property was booked by a name matching one of the HOA board members' cousins. It had been used before for what looked like HOA interventions against residents with overdue fines, trash can violations, and in one case, planting non-regulation tulips. By mid-afternoon, we had visuals on the house. Curtains drawn, garage door half shut, two individuals on the porch, both wearing those same pathetic uniforms. They didn't look like law enforcers. They looked like mall Santas on summer break. I coordinated with my team to maintain visual distance while I made a quiet entrance through the side fence. One of my officers had circled around and peeked through the back window. There he was, Ethan. Calm but obviously confused, sitting in a folding chair, his hands zip-tied behind him. Next to him was a cooler full of Capri Suns and a notepad labeled Behavior Report. I whispered into my mic, "On my signal. 3, 2, 1. I opened the side door slowly and walked into the house. The two fake cops jumped like I was a ghost. I didn't say a word at first. Just pulled my badge and held it in front of them. Their faces drained of color. "Let me guess," I said, glancing around. "You're Officer Ted and Sergeant Greg from the HOA's new pretend patrol." "We were told this was legal," one of them stammered. "Karen said we could do this." "Did she also tell you impersonating an officer and detaining a child gets you 15 years in federal prison?" I stepped forward. "Drop the plastic badge. Remove the radio. Sit on your hands." They did, fast. I walked over to Ethan, cut the zip ties, and gave him a nod. "You good?" "Yeah," he said, rubbing his wrists. They offered me a Lunchable and tried to make me write an apology letter for excessive dog behavior. I thought I was being punked. "We're going to make sure the entire world knows you weren't," I said. As we walked out, real officers and unmarked units rolled up. No sirens. No drama. Just calm, efficient takedown. Karen's little army had crumbled in less than 4 hours. But for me, this was just the beginning, because I wasn't just bringing charges. I was going to dismantle their entire operation. And Karen, she had no idea her smug little empire was about to become headline news. The ride back home with Ethan was silent at first. Not because we didn't have anything to say, but because the sheer absurdity of what had just happened hadn't fully settled in. My son, zip-tied in a stranger's rental property by 2 HOA-sponsored wannabe cops, was now calmly sipping a Capri Sun in the passenger seat like it was just another Saturday. Every few seconds, he'd glance at me with that look only a teenager could master, a mix of disbelief and amusement. I, on the other hand, was trying to stop myself from going full nuclear. Not for Ethan's sake, he was safe now, but because this neighborhood had no idea just how deep they'd gone into illegal territory. And I was going to unravel every inch of it, one smug Karen at a time. Back at the house, my wife hugged Ethan so tightly he nearly dropped his juice pouch. The security footage, saved in 4 different locations by now, had already been reviewed by 2 senior officers I trusted beyond words. We had faces, timestamps, vehicle make and model, entry and exit footage, and even the moment one of the fake officers tripped on the front steps and accidentally flashed his fake license to detain. If it weren't so serious, it would have been a comedy sketch. After Ethan went upstairs to decompress with some video games, I called in my internal team. Not just anyone. These were the off-the-book specialists, people who handled corruption cases, deep investigations, and situations too messy or political for regular channels. I explained everything: Karen's smug attitude, the HOA's new self-declared enforcement initiative, and the use of a short-term rental as a secret holding site. Their reaction was the same across the board: stunned silence, then visible excitement. The first priority was information control. We couldn't let this leak to the media. Not yet. Once the real evidence was solid and the charges were prepared, it would go public on my terms. Not as a neighborhood rumor or some Reddit conspiracy thread. One of my officers, Marcus, began quietly canvassing the neighborhood. He pretended to be a jogger, a dog walker, and a delivery guy, all in the same day, asking casual questions. In less than 24 hours, he'd spoken to 8 residents who all reported the same pattern: aggressive warnings from HOA members, threats of detainment for minor rule violations, and strange men in blue polo shirts knocking on doors with clipboards and laminated cards that looked vaguely official. The deeper we looked, the more bizarre it became. Turns out the HOA had been slowly grooming residents into accepting their faux law and order. They created fake codes like 87C and 52T, claimed new patrol rules had passed during executive meetings that were never publicly documented, and had been using community dues to pay for all of it. The uniforms, the magnetic signs, the laminated badges. It had all been funded through a vaguely worded budget item labeled Neighborhood Safety Expansion. It wasn't just overreach. It was coordinated fraud and impersonation with traceable funding. That meant someone had signed off. And that signature led to Tom Holloway, Karen's husband and current HOA president. Now Tom was one of those guys who wore boat shoes in winter and called himself a professional HOA strategist. The man couldn't spell jurisdiction, let alone understand it. But he knew power, or at least the illusion of it. My team obtained one of the HOA's internal meeting recordings thanks to a smart resident named Melinda, who had grown suspicious months ago and planted a recorder in her purse. On that tape, Tom said something that made everyone in the room sit up straight when I played it. "We can't wait for the city anymore. If we want order, we create it. Nobody's going to stop us. Not the police, not the mayor, not even the feds." The arrogance in his voice practically dripped through the speakers. Armed with that, I authorized a covert financial audit on the HOA. We pulled their public filings, reviewed their community budgets, and discovered something interesting. A secondary account labeled HOA Safe opened just 3 months ago. It was where payments for community patrol training were being funneled. Problem was, the people being paid were not licensed security professionals. They were the HOA president's nephew, 2 of his unemployed friends, and someone listed only as Consultant Mike, who we discovered was an ex-mall cop with multiple citations for misconduct. That's when we went to Karen again, this time with a plan. One of my undercover officers, Lisa, posed as a potential buyer looking to invest in the neighborhood. She called Karen under the pretense of wanting to learn about the community's safety initiatives. Karen couldn't help herself. She invited Lisa to a small gathering in her backyard the next day, promising a presentation about the HOA's enforcement strategy. What Karen didn't know was that Lisa was wired. The backyard had hidden cams set up, and every word would be reviewed in real time by my team. At the gathering, Karen gave a full speech. She bragged about the patrol initiative, praised the officers for keeping the neighborhood civilized, and even handed out brochures that read Neighborhood Order First. In her most ironic quote of the night, she said, "Some people think we're going too far, but they don't realize we're ahead of the curve. We're the future of community enforcement." That statement sealed it. We had motive, operation, funding, recorded planning, and now self-incrimination. But the cherry on top came when Karen led Lisa on a house tour and opened a locked closet in her garage to show off their command station. Inside, 2 walkie-talkies, 3 fake badges, a whiteboard full of names, addresses, and HOA violator levels, and a printed map with red pins marking problem homes. One of them was mine. Another, a 70-year-old woman who once painted her fence lavender instead of beige. I was done watching from the sidelines. The next morning, I called the district attorney and laid out the full case. She couldn't believe it. "You're telling me the HOA built a fake police force and detained your son to make an example?" I nodded. "And now I'm making them mine." We prepared formal charges against Tom Holloway, Karen, the fake officers, and 3 other board members: impersonation of law enforcement, unlawful detainment, fraudulent financial activity, misuse of community funds, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. It was going to be a legal storm. Before the papers were filed, I met Karen one last time. She was at the park, organizing a group yoga class on freshly chalked HOA-approved mats. I walked up, nodded politely, and handed her a manila envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Your reality check," I said. She opened it. Her face turned gray as she flipped through the preliminary charges. I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned and walked away, adding just one final note over my shoulder. "Oh, and Karen, your little enforcement team? They'll be explaining things to a real judge soon. Don't worry, we've got plenty of room for all of you." And with that, the clock started ticking on the HOA's downfall. The silence at the Holloway residence the morning after Karen received the envelope was louder than any siren. For a woman who once posted 8 Facebook updates about a neighbor's grass height in one afternoon, she hadn't posted a single thing since receiving the charges. The HOA clubhouse, usually bustling with morning chatter, was closed, blinds drawn tight. But for my team, the work had only just begun. We weren't after noise. We were after a network, a tangled web of arrogance and fake authority that had grown in the shadows of suburban self-righteousness. The so-called Neighborhood Enforcement Council wasn't just a bizarre project. It was a structured, well-funded operation with roots deeper than anyone had imagined. Melinda, the resident with the recording, had more than one bombshell to share. She forwarded emails and group texts between board members discussing behavioral thresholds, deterrent escalation, and even routine detainment drills. They had rankings for residents based on how compliant they were. Level 1 violators got warnings and fines. Level 2 got what they called community guidance sessions, those awkward HOA staged interventions in driveways. But Level 3, that's what Ethan had been labeled, after he apparently walked Max off-leash past Karen's hydrangeas one too many times. Level 3 was the category where they tested their enforcement method. Real consequences, they called it. Real consequences, with fake cops and a borrowed handcuff set from an old costume party. We combed through every financial ledger the HOA had filed over the past 2 years. A forensic accountant from the department helped track funds that had been split across various sub-accounts, most of them under vague names like Landscaping Overflow, Security Training, and Public Harmony Initiative. Those last two were the main funnels. The training sessions had never been filed with a real security firm. Instead, they'd been hosted at a rented banquet hall, where Tom's brother-in-law Gary, the disgraced ex-cop, had given so-called enforcement lectures. We got footage from the venue's CCTV. Gary stood in front of folding chairs wearing a fake sheriff star he likely bought online, walking attendees through neighborhood arrest protocols. The attendees, mostly neighborhood bullies in polos, folks with pent-up control issues, had finally found their outlet through an HOA-sponsored vigilante fantasy. My assistant dropped another stack of files on my desk. Complaint letters from residents who had received warnings, patrol visits, or even detainment threats. Most had brushed it off as HOA eccentricity, until now. But knowing what we knew, each letter read like a scream ignored. One resident, a disabled Army vet named Luis, had been issued a violation for placing a flag on his porch on a non-designated holiday. When he refused to remove it, 2 of the fake patrolmen showed up, claiming they had the authority to temporarily suspend patriotic displays, and threatened to take his dog. Luis had a camera too. We had the footage. They were the same 2 who took Ethan. The case was no longer isolated. It was a pattern, targeting the vulnerable, the quiet, the ones who wouldn't push back. The district attorney's office moved quickly after that. Warrants were signed. Subpoenas issued. And our strategy remained. No leaks, no alerts, full execution in one coordinated sweep. But before that could happen, I wanted one more piece of the puzzle in place. I needed to know who funded the start of this madness. These weren't just HOA dues. There was private money involved. That kind of custom printing, gear acquisition, and legal paperwork masking required more than bake sale cash. We found the trail in a flagged transaction from a shell company labeled Urban Harmony Consultants. It was registered to an LLC that belonged to Tom Holloway's law school roommate, another former cop who'd left the force after multiple citizen complaints. The guy now ran a community management consulting firm that specialized in helping HOAs push the boundaries of civil enforcement. It was all coming together like a badly written thriller novel. But the difference here was the real police were the ones holding the pen. I ordered a round of silent interviews with known HOA board members. Off record, but recorded. We offered deals to the low-level players, the ones who had doubts, the ones who might crack. And crack they did. One woman, Barbara, treasurer and head of the Community Beautification Committee, confessed everything. She'd been bullied into silence, threatened with fines, and even received an anonymous note saying her husband's license plate was on the HOA's internal watch list. Another member, Harold, said he'd been bribed with a landscaping contract for voting in favor of the patrol expansion. But the real twist came from an unexpected place. Ethan. Sitting on the couch, watching the news with me one night, he asked a question I hadn't considered. "Dad, do you think they ever planned to stop?" I paused, looked at him, and realized the answer was no. They wouldn't have stopped. They were getting braver. The detainment wasn't a one-off. It was a trial run. If they got away with Ethan, who knows what they'd try next? What started as HOA fines had mutated into a full-blown rogue justice system. Unchecked, untrained, and completely illegal. And the sickest part? Some of them genuinely believed they were heroes, restoring order to the suburbs. The morning of the takedown came with no sirens, no flashing lights, just precision. Officers in plain clothes moved in on the HOA clubhouse, the Holloway house, and 3 other properties used for enforcement operations. We arrested Gary at a gas station, Tom during his morning jog, and Karen, ironically, during a yoga pose in her backyard. She tried to talk her way out of it, throwing around phrases like community immunity and citizen charter enforcement. But it didn't matter. She was cuffed by one of the very officers she had called ineffective during a community meeting last year. Back at the precinct, the booking process was clean and fast. Fingerprints, mugshots, evidence cataloging. I looked through the two-way glass at Tom and Karen, sitting in separate rooms. Tom tapped his fingers nervously, occasionally glancing at the camera. Karen stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if daring someone to question her authority again. They weren't running anything anymore. They weren't special, empowered, or protected. They were suspects, and soon, they'd be defendants. I released a short statement to the press that afternoon. Carefully worded. Nothing too sensational. Just enough to confirm that law enforcement had intervened in an active investigation involving impersonation, detainment, and financial misconduct by a local HOA. No names, no gory details. Just enough to let them know the situation was under control. But I knew it wouldn't stay quiet for long, and that was fine. Let the storm come. I had the truth, the law, and the full force of my badge. And if anyone thought this was the end of the story, they had no idea what was coming next. Because I wasn't just cleaning up their mess, I was about to turn it into a warning for every overreaching HOA in the country. News spreads faster when people think they're the ones breaking it. That's exactly what happened the morning after the arrests. A local blogger posted a blurry photo of Karen being led to a squad car mid-downward dog, her yoga mat still under one arm, hair frazzled and eyes wide. The headline was simple but effective. HOA Queen Karen cuffed. Turns out her cops were cosplayers. By noon, it had over 100,000 shares. By the end of the day, national outlets were calling. Reporters camped out near the gates of our community, asking residents for statements, waving microphones at anyone who walked by with a leash or a clipboard. Karen had always dreamed of being famous. She just didn't know it would be with a booking number. Inside the department, things were less theatrical, but far more critical. The DA's office had moved swiftly. Formal charges had been filed against 7 individuals. Tom Holloway, Karen, Gary the trainer, the 2 main fake officers, and 2 HOA board members who had orchestrated the funding shell account. Each of them was facing a unique cocktail of charges, from impersonating law enforcement to unlawful detainment, criminal conspiracy, and misuse of public funds. One board member even had a pending charge for wire fraud after he tried to transfer remaining HOA funds into an offshore account 3 hours after the first arrest. Luckily, the bank froze the transaction when the routing details were flagged by an alert we had put in place weeks prior. And while the legal machinery spun into action, the neighborhood itself began to turn against the very system it had once tolerated. A community town hall was called, not by the HOA this time, but by the residents themselves. It was held in the local high school auditorium, and by the time I walked in, every seat was taken. The room buzzed with anger, disbelief, and in some cases, laughter. Laughter at the absurdity of what the HOA had become. Laughter at the brochure someone passed around that read, Neighborhood Justice Unit, apply today, with a photo of Karen pointing like she was auditioning for a low-budget action film. The microphone passed from one person to another. A man named Doug, who had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, took the stage and held up a notice he'd received 6 months ago, for hanging wind chimes that weren't HOA approved. I thought it was ridiculous then, he said. But I paid the fine. Figured. Follow the rules. Keep the peace. Now I find out the same people who find me were kidnapping kids and playing dress-up behind our backs. Then came Melanie, a mother of 3. Her voice cracked as she talked about the fear her daughter had felt when 2 patrolmen knocked on their door last month asking about noise levels during a birthday party. She'd assumed they were real, official. Her husband had argued with them, and she now realized that could have ended very differently. The weight of what could have happened hung in the air. But it wasn't just anger. People wanted change. They demanded it. A vote was initiated to formally dissolve the HOA. Bylaws were read aloud. A motion was made. A second followed. And then the vote. Unanimous. The HOA was finished. Effective immediately. The governing board was stripped of authority, pending a court-managed financial audit and resident-led restructuring. The clubhouse was closed, Locks changed by the local council under emergency order. Karen's little empire had crumbled. Not with a bang, but with a room full of neighbors finally saying enough. Back at home, Ethan and I watched the recap on the evening news. He still had that calm, amused look about him, but I could tell the ordeal had changed him. Not in a bad way, though. He was more alert, more thoughtful. He asked questions now, not just about safety, but about power, about how systems fail when good people look the other way. It was the kind of awareness you can't teach in a classroom. The kind that sticks with someone for life. That night, my phone rang. It was a senior producer from a national news network. They wanted an exclusive interview, not just about the arrests, but about the broader implications. A choice across the country had been watching. Some were doubling down on their policies. Others were panicking. The producer asked me what message I wanted to send. I paused before replying. "Tell them this isn't just a local issue," I said. "Tell them any system built on intimidation and unchecked authority will collapse the second someone holds up a mirror." By the end of the week, the viral video of Ethan's detainment had racked up over 5 million views. The footage from our doorbell cam, showing the ridiculous uniforms, the unmarked SUV, and Karen's smug approval nod, had become a meme. People added sound effects, slow-motion replays, and text overlays. One version showed Ethan being arrested while dramatic courtroom music played, ending with a cut to me flashing my badge with the words, "Plot twist, Dad's the boss." And while it was easy to laugh at now, the reality was still serious. Lives had been disrupted. Trust had been broken. The neighborhood had to heal from being turned into a playground for petty tyrants. But that healing had started. With every joke, every meme, every shared story, people were reclaiming their voice. Karen's court appearance was set for the following month. Rumor had it she planned to represent herself. No attorney wanted to touch the case, and her pride wouldn't allow her to plead guilty. Tom, meanwhile, had quietly agreed to a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation. He'd already turned over more documents, emails, and planning notes that exposed even more players behind the scenes. The scope of the operation had grown so large that the state attorney general had opened an investigation into similar HOAs using Karen's model. And amidst it all, I found a moment of peace, a strange full-circle moment. I stood at the former HOA clubhouse, now vacant and quiet. I looked up at the sign, and in my mind, I imagined something different. A place not for rules, fines, or power plays, but for real community. 4 youth programs, neighborhood gatherings, and something positive. A space to rebuild trust, not exploit it. I called a local non-profit that specialized in community youth engagement. I told them I wanted to fund a new program, a leadership academy for teens interested in public service, justice, and community organization. I offered the building free of charge. They accepted. As I walked back to my car, I passed by a new notice staked in the ground. It wasn't from an HOA, and it wasn't a threat. It read, "Coming soon. The Commissioner Center for Youth Justice. Powered by accountability, not authority." I smiled. Let them come see it. Let every HOA that ever considered stepping out of line walk past this place and remember what happens when you try to play cop in a city where the real ones still stand for something. The courtroom was packed to the walls. People standing in the aisles, peeking through the glass, just to catch a glimpse of the spectacle. It wasn't every day that a suburban HOA scandal turned into a state-level legal disaster, and the community wasn't going to miss the final act. Karen sat at the defense table, stubbornly upright, her lips pressed into a paper-thin line. She wore a stiff beige blazer and an expression that somehow managed to look both defiant and confused. She had refused legal counsel, insisted on representing herself, and was now attempting to navigate a courtroom like it was a neighborhood board meeting, where everyone was forced to listen to her. But this time, the judge didn't roll over. He didn't defer to her interruptions or let her ramble through irrelevant rants about civil codes or neighborhood sovereignty. He shut her down with gavel strikes that echoed like thunder. Her attempt to cross-examine a real police officer with a printed-out copy of an HOA handbook ended in disaster. The courtroom chuckled, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. She truly thought this was her stage, her community theater moment. But instead, she was fumbling in a production way above her role. Tom Holloway, in contrast, sat quietly behind the prosecution table. His plea deal required full cooperation, and the documents he'd turned over had painted a detailed portrait of just how far things had gone. Under his leadership, the HOA board had started with strict enforcement, then built a network of surveillance, intimidation, and ultimately illegal detainment. He admitted to creating the so-called community enforcement doctrine and to approving the purchase of fake uniforms, laminated IDs, and even the unlicensed radios used by the impersonators. His testimony was clear, remorseful, and damning. He didn't try to spin it. He didn't claim ignorance. He confessed to arrogance. But he did say one thing that stuck with me. We thought we were keeping order. But what we really did was create chaos, and call it control. The judge reviewed the charges: impersonation of law enforcement, false imprisonment, conspiracy to defraud, and misuse of community funds. Each charge carried weight, and Karen was facing all of them. She had filed motion after motion, none of which made any legal sense, and even tried to call the HOA charter as her primary defense document. The judge shut it down instantly. "This isn't a community picnic," he told her. "This is a court of law. You don't get to redefine reality just because you have a clipboard." The sentencing wasn't theatrical. It was quiet, firm, and thorough. Karen was given 18 months in county jail, with 5 years probation and a lifelong ban from serving on any governance board. The two fake officers were sentenced to 2 years each, though they pleaded guilty and expressed deep regret, admitting they had been promised job security and told everything was legal. Gary, the ex-cop who trained them, received the harshest sentence: 4 years for impersonation and conspiracy. The remaining HOA board members involved were placed under house arrest, with heavy fines and mandatory public service. When it was all said and done, the courtroom emptied slowly, as if no one could quite believe it was finally over. Outside, reporters asked the same question over and over. How did something like this happen in a quiet suburban neighborhood? The answer, I told them, was simple. It happened because people were too polite to say no, until it was too late. The system wasn't broken. It had been hijacked by people who believed rules were more important than right. But now it had been taken back. Weeks passed, and life returned to a version of normal, though the neighborhood felt different now. Not worse, just clearer. People greeted each other with less suspicion, more honesty. The new neighborhood council, formed with oversight and elected by true majority vote, focused on rebuilding trust. Gone were the patrols, the fines, the secret cameras. In their place were community barbecues, open forums, and volunteer projects that reminded everyone why they moved here in the first place. The clubhouse was officially rebranded and reopened. The Commissioner Center for Youth Justice welcomed its first group of teens that month. The walls that once displayed framed HOA rules now showcase murals painted by students, each one representing unity, fairness, and the importance of speaking up. Ethan volunteered there every weekend, helping with conflict resolution workshops and telling his story to other kids. His calm under pressure and willingness to testify publicly earned him a City Youth Award, presented by the mayor herself. That ceremony, more than anything, marked the turning of a page. Karen, after serving 6 months due to good behavior, quietly moved to a new state. But the internet never forgets. Her face, her courtroom rants, and her infamous line, "I hereby detain you in the name of suburban order," had become immortalized in memes, podcasts, and even a late-night comedy skit. She had become the face of what happens when control becomes obsession. As for me, I never set out to be a headline. I was a police commissioner, a father, and a neighbor. But when your child is zip-tied by people pretending to be something they're not, everything becomes personal. I didn't go after Karen out of vengeance. I went after her because justice shouldn't depend on titles or uniforms. It should depend on truth. One afternoon, as I stood outside the youth center, a man approached me with a handshake. He said his HOA, back in another state, had just voted to disband their private security plan after watching what happened here. "We realized we were heading down the same path," he said. "You stopped it before it spread." That's when I knew this wasn't just a victory for our neighborhood. It was a warning to others. A reminder that you don't need a badge to do the right thing. But if you use a fake one to do the wrong thing, someone real will come knocking. And for anyone who still thinks HOA power can't be challenged, just remember, my kid was arrested by pretend cops. And I arrested every last one of them in return. Not just as a cop, but as a dad. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat.